There was no one in the history of mankind that was as anti-Semitic, that was as hateful, that was as monstrous a person as Hitler, Yamach Shemam. And redeem us speedily for your name's sake. The redemption here, and I saw this from a number of sources, the redemption here is not the request for the final redemption. Yes, we're asking for a present day personal redemption, but with a recognition that it's not complete. It's only temporary and superficial. Is there any state we could really be in that isn't the ultimate redemption, where we can feel like, oh, everything's fine? Should we ever feel that way? Is there really such a thing? Is there such a thing as, it's not the final redemption, but we are redeemed in some way. This redemption that we are asking for now is certainly only temporary. And we recognize that it's only temporary. And it can only end in one of two ways. It could get better and transition into the final redemption which we want, or it can get worse and we can fall back into suffering. So Rabbi Schwab actually spends relatively little wordage on actually examining the wording of this bracha. He spends more time, believe it or not, reminiscing about his experience in Europe, in Germany, where he was from, in the years leading up to the war. When Hitler came to power, he was living in Germany. He says there was no one in the history of mankind that was as anti-Semitic, that was as hateful, it was as monstrous a person as Hitler, Yamach Shemam. And I think he may even say, if you put all the Jew haters in the world in history together, you wouldn't get one Hitler. He said such a monster was Hitler that when he came to power in Germany, a lot of Jews got the message and they left. And a lot of Jews said,
didn't get the message and didn't leave.
It'll blow over. It'll blow over, you know? Things will go back to normal soon, right? And there was an unfortunate end to that line of thinking. So he says that, he talks about this, that, you know, no matter where we are and no matter what's going on in our lives, until the final Geula comes, there's no absolute respite. We kind of always have to be looking over our shoulders. So let me read it to you inside. Sometimes we ourselves are not even aware that we are living in perilous circumstances. Human nature is such that when one is in a very serious and dangerous situation, he may tend to minimize or overlook it. I remember the Germany of the early 30s, when Hitler, Yamach Shemoy V'Zichroi, first came to power. There never was a person as evil as he was. If we were to take all the Rishayim in history and bundle them together on one side of a scale and put Hitler on the other side, he would outweigh them all combined. While a small number of Jews left Germany immediately, most people thought that Hitler's government, with its virulent anti-Semitic policies, was an aberration that would soon, quote, blow over, and normal democratic conditions would quickly return to Germany. This general attitude existed in Germany and certainly in faraway Eastern Europe. I saw a description by a Bacher in the Mir Yeshiva of his life during the years 1936 to 1938, in which he says that he felt quite safe in Poland, although he knew that he could not travel to Germany because of the political situation there. How blind these people were to the extremely menacing situation in which they lived. See, this doesn't sound like a commentary on the Shemona Esrei, but all this he puts into the bracha for Hashem relieving the troubles that we face presently, before we reach the redemptive age. Okay, continuing, he says, when I came to America in December 1936, this country was known as the Golden Medina. However, today we realize that it is not golden at all, but rather it is based on paper money. As free as we seem to be here, nevertheless, we should know that here too in America, we are living in Gullus. There is hate all around us. This was a big surprise about 15 years ago. I'm not sure when he wrote this book, but now we realize that even here in America, we are not secure. We came here because we were disliked in Europe. And if we were suddenly forced to leave America, where would we find security? Now listen, it's very powerful what he's about to say. Where would we find security? In Eretz Yisrael? There we are faced with the so-called Palestinians, a relatively new entity who don't like us there either and who want the land for themselves. Who says we will be secure there? Where shall we go? To the moon? There is no place on earth where Jews are erwünscht. Now, that's a German word, and in parentheses it says welcome. There's no place on earth where Jews are welcome, where the general population desires and would welcome an influx of Jews. Therefore, as long as we are in Galus, we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to protect us from the danger that lurks all around us, although such danger may be quite unbeknown to us. There's more, but in the meantime, in other words, whatever relief we're asking for, we have to understand that it's superficial and temporary. So why ask at all, right? So bear with me. When I first came to America, having just left the virulent Nazi Jew hatred in Germany, I inquired of someone who had already been here for some 40 years about the anti-Semitism in America. He responded, quote, "Nobody likes us, but some don't hate us." This was borne out a few years later during World War II, when the highest military authorities in Washington were asked to bomb the railroad tracks leading to Auschwitz and other concentration camps, where thousands upon thousands of our brethren were brought daily to be murdered in the most brutal way. A few bombs would have been enough to interdict those railroad tracks and save countless numbers of Jews. However, these pleas fell upon deaf ears because nobody liked us enough to save thousands of Jewish lives. Our situation in Gullus is a tenuous one, despite the fact that we may feel quite secure, replete with potential dangers that are not always known to us. This is analogous to one who feels quite healthy, except for some minor discomforts. However, when his doctor examines him, he discovers that he is indeed seriously ill. And I think, in other words, I think that's an awareness that the authors of the Shemona Esrei want us to have. Don't get comfortable. Don't get complacent, right? Like, okay, things are okay. Like Rabbi Schwab says, things are okay in America right now. But don't think everybody loves you. Don't think it's utopia. Don't think that you could just go on like this and you're safe forever. And he says, really, even in Eretz Yisrael, there's no guarantees. We're still in Galus. Doesn't matter physically on earth where you are. And maybe there's an added degree of divine providence or protection in Eretz Yisrael, and it's a holier place, and maybe it's preferable to be there. But it's not a geurantee until we have the Geula Shlema. So I think the recognition of that is, yes, Hashem, we're asking for a relief from our trouble, but of course with the recognition that it's not where we need to be. That ultimately there's another step that needs to come, although it's not here yet. What would be considered Geula then? So just as an example, so coming out of Mitzrayim, when we left Egypt, that was called Geula. When we came out of Babylonian exile and returned to Israel, even though that was a small portion relatively of the Jewish people who returned, that was called Geula. These all were known as Geulas, even though they weren't complete. But there's some recognizable condition that changes from the worst to the better. And Rav Schwab points it out that there's constantly sort of a geula, necessary, needed, wanted, requested, and presently happening. Hashem is constantly doing this for us every single day, every time we take in a breath of air, and every time we open our eyes, and every time our heart beats. It's a geula. It's a geula, because without that, what would we have? We would have nothing. So Hashem is constantly, in a certain way, removing afflictions and removing obstacles from our lives.
Is the only alternative either affliction or redemption? Is there nothing in between?
So not only is there nothing in between, but I would wager to say that no matter what you're doing, no matter what you're going through, until we get to Geula Shlema, you are both being redeemed and afflicted at the same time. It just depends on which angle you're viewing it from. In other words, it's like two sides of a coin. You're being redeemed from something, but you're also lacking some level of redemption, which you could qualify as an affliction. We're never fully redeemed, Rav Schwab says, right? Don't get complacent. we can't go to the moon to escape the ones who want to kill us, right? And even Eretz Yisrael is not a guarantee, he says. So there's no full redemption until there's a full redemption. We might be in a state of comfort and relief right now, but it's relief from something. It's geula from something, but it's also being withheld from something else. So every moment we're in is both things at once. It's both a geula from what's worse, and it's affliction from what could be better. So we're just kind of asking Hashem to like keep moving us along, like up the scale, you know? Don't let us drop down too far. But hopefully to the Geula Shlema. Where shall we go? To the moon?